Hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Radical Radio Scotland. Today's conversation is with the fantastic Caitlin Lee. Caitlin is a trade unionist and a campaigner. She's currently the chair of Unite Hospitality Glasgow, and she's also involved in the Safe Home campaign. I was fortunate enough to work with Caitlin on some projects over the past year, and I am delighted to share her words with all of you today. So everybody, please put your hands together for Caitlin Lee. Okay, so before we get into the conversation where we're talking about you in the past year with Unite and stuff like that, I'd like to just talk about what's happening just now. A week ago, we seen that 70% of workers across 13 bars in Glasgow and Dundee, they submitted a collective grievance outlining exploitation in regards to health and safety, their pay, contracts, hours, break times. I think you told me earlier that you were going to Dundee just now. Is that related to this? And could you tell us a bit about the situation and what Unite Hospitality Glasgow is doing and so on?
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things about the Mchale staff that have collected this grievance, it's quite similar to, like, for instance, Punks with Purpose and also even like West in 2020, and the fact that these are companies or like brands that kind of play on the image of like hipster customers and stuff like that, and people that are probably going to identify as being more like left leaning, but in actual fact they're the companies that are actually the most toxic and the most exploitative. So with the Mchale 300, the grievance and the kind of social media that we've had has like exploded, and I really do think that that's due to the kind of reach that Unite Hospitality's built over the year, but also the fact that it is a company that you would probably think, oh, they're quite quirky. The directors have handlebar mustaches, they must pay their staff well. Not the case. So I think it's kind of trying, like, and in hospitality, I think it's kind of trying to break down that image of, if you think they're a good guy, they're probably good to their employees, which is actually coming out that it's completely the opposite. In regards to the grievance, like, it's the two kind of main leaders have worked since like Christmas Eve up until last week, putting a dossier of like evidence and a grievance together, which entails like just about everything. There is breaches of health and safety, COVID regulations, sexual harassment, issues with HMRC, multiple, like basically anything that could be deemed as a toxic workplace. I think it's included in this. So we've got about 70% of workers that have actually signed up and kind of agreed with this, and it's been building up over, and it was a really quick turnover. About 10 days, these two leaders managed to get 70% of their workforce to sign it, which is extraordinary. And it's for it to happen in the first week of January, it was really, really good for me, like even personally, because when you're a kind of activist and stuff like that, it can be kind of exhausting. But to see these people power through with this, and in the first week of January stand up to one of the most well-known brands in Dundee, and now kind of trying to break the market in Glasgow, it was really quite emotional, but it proper kind of got me going. The solidarity that folk have kind of expressed towards these workers as well, whether it be in attending the picket that was at Abandoned Ship, the kind of backlash of the grievance on like kind of social media, the media coverage from like STV and BBC News, and then also the fund that was set up. So in retaliation to the grievance, one of the venues that was 100% union density was closed without any notice and without actually informing the staff when it will be reopened. So this is a no promise of wages during this closure. So the Solidarity Fund's kind of set up for things like that, because this is what's kind of happening. Our key leaders their shifts have been reduced to one shift a week. And it's like a 4-hour shift. So they're trying to kind of batter them down by financially burdening them. So to set up a fund that's going to go, actually, you can continue what you're doing. The people of like Glasgow, Dundee, branches across the whole of the UK have donated to this, and everyone supports you. I think kind of gave a bit of a boost, but also a bit of security that the directors and the company, Mchale 300, are refusing to give their staff. So I think that's the kind of background of it. And then today we are going to be holding a rally demonstration. It's not exactly a picket. The directors have directly threatened that if there is a picket, they will close venues, which I can come from the position where I don't actually work for the company. I don't know how that would feel for me. But we did all agree as a collective that it's still important to be there. So it's going to be more of a calling for recognition, like a trade union recognition agreement, and also to discuss the fact that workers have the power, and which we shouldn't be giving it to these directors, and we shouldn't be afraid to come together as a collective and discuss issues that are happening with hospitality, with people in the street or other venues and stuff like that. So it's going to be big. It's going to be like it'll be a good kind of few hours in Dundee, and we've not done a lot of action in Dundee, so it's quite exciting. Like, I've never actually even been to Dundee, so yeah, I know.
Dundee's class. I love Dundee.
I'm excited, and then a few pints after it with like people. So it'd be good to, like, because we've obviously only been like messaging on like WhatsApp and stuff. So it'd be good to actually meet these like leaders in person, because I feel like you kind of do feed off other people's energy, and their fight is so kind of inspiring just now. I think I'll come away buzzing.
Yeah, oh, definitely. That sounds unreal. I mean, like you were saying at the start, it is really similar to like Brewdog and stuff like that as well, where they're just got this image where they're trying to perpetuate the myth that they're, because they're like cool or trendy or whatever, that obviously that carries over into their working conditions, and it's just not the case.
Yeah.
That's wild, man. That's wild. But Dundee will be class. I'm excited for you.
Aye.
Dundee's a pure good city as well, and I think it has quite a strong left-leaning history as well. Mm-hmm. So it would be good for Unite Hospitality to kind of push into that.
Yeah, we are excited about that. So the kind of long-term goal is obviously setting up a branch in Dundee as well. So this will help with maybe trying to get more members in like different venues, but also what the workers have said about the fund. So the Solidarity Fund's it's up at £2,500.
Wow.
I know, and there's going to be more kind of donations coming in and stuff like that. What they're saying was, with the remainder of the money, to set up a kind of fund, like even a kind of different one. So if there is another venue in Dundee that wants to get union recognition, then they'll donate to that workplace if the same issues happen there, or if they need anything. So basically it's going to keep kind of going and like kind of going a full circle. So they're already trying to build something bigger than just their reactionary situation, which I think will be really good, because then we'll have kind of 3 hospitality branches in Scotland, Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow, and the kind of network of like support that you can build from that would be really beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. And Dundee has like a really thriving hospitality sector as well. It's like get really big on nightlife and stuff like that. Obviously, it's a really studenty place as well. So yeah, obviously students in that will be some of the most exploited workers in one of the most exploited industries as well. So that'll be good. Hopefully it starts to, well, like you say, continue to snowball. That'll be dynamite. But yeah, on to yourself. So how did you become involved in trade unionism, and specifically Unite Hospitality Glasgow?
So it was in 2020. So I worked for a hotel, and obviously everyone went on to furlough during the lockdown. It's really weird. It's actually quite emotional. It was the last day of May, so I was really stressed because I was on a really bad contract even like before COVID, which was 30 hours a month.
A month?
Yes, that was it. So when furlough was kind of announced and stuff like that, I thought, am I getting 80% of 30 hours a month? So that was a huge stress, and we didn't have any kind of clarity of what people were, and but like asking for what am I getting paid this month? They were like, oh, we can't go by an individual basis. We can't tell you that. We don't know, and stuff. So I didn't know what my first wage was going to be, and then it came through, and it was actually okay because it's a average of your whole hours, so it was all right. Like I'm like, okay, I can kind of survive. And then, you know, like the kind of stress of like just even being in lockdown, April was pretty difficult, just like kind of adjusting to the world and the kind of situation that we were in. May, it was obviously sunny, so we were able to sit out in the kind of garden more and kind of speak to our neighbours and, you know, kind of build up a different support network and stuff. And then I remember it was the last day of like May, and I went a walk around Queen's Park, and it was really, really sunny, and I sat down like in like one of the hills, and I actually turned around to my boyfriend and went, I feel at ease. I think everything's going to be okay. Like I'm not worried about money. I understand like we're in a pandemic, but we'll get through it. And you know what? I feel pretty relaxed, and that's the first time I felt relaxed since like the beginning of March. The next day we had a 10 a.m. Zoom call, and our general manager announced that we were going to be making compulsory redundancies.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was like what the just like the kind of any security that I'd had for about 12 hours was just ripped away from me. So the kind of the first day was just like sitting trying to like take that in, what that meant, and then kind of thinking like, what is it I want? What do I want to do about this? Because I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I'm not going to sit and take it, kind of thing. And then I think it was like 2 days after that, I held a Zoom call and invited people that I could trust more than anything. But it actually, because obviously everyone was reaching out for answers, so it did kind of get bigger. So it was about 60 people on the first Zoom call that I basically told people, we need to join, you need to join the union, and this is what we need to be fighting back for, and this is what we need to be looking at, and kind of discussing the fact that it was totally out of order that they were trying to make these compulsory redundancies. Then got in contact with my organiser because he'd heard that I'd had this call and stuff, and I was elected, so I put myself forward to be elected to represent my department during the redundancy kind of process and stuff, which is, it's like you legally have to do it. They did everything literally by the book and not a comma off of it kind of thing. But I put in, and like as like Unite Hospitality, we got all the members to sign an alternative to the redundancies and stuff like that. One of the emails I got back was from the general manager of the hotel chains. He at some point wrote in bold, like emailed me back in bold and also in red writing. And I was just like, who do you think you're speaking to? Kind of thing. Like, what
the hell?
You're on like a a 6-figure salary, and you're trying to bully a 25-year-old person that's trying to stop job losses. So I was, that was one of the ones that kind of really did annoy me. But the way that he'd done it, I responded back with like the backing from the union being like, can you explain to me exactly what you're not going to consider, and it was like the first kind of and he responded back with like an apology and being like, please do not think that I would ever in any way curtail anything. I was like, that's exactly what you did. But it kind of showed me that you actually do have kind of power against these people. So we managed to hold off the redundancies for months. Like people got furloughed till September. They wanted it over and done with by July. But like the kind of reopening, but that didn't happen. We got like media coverage, we got a lot of kind of support and stuff like that, and we were one of the first companies to face the redundancies, and then obviously it happened like all over Scotland, so people were kind of taken from like us being like, oh, look what these workers in 2 hotels in Glasgow are doing to fight against this, and contacting like Unite. So it did kind of try and help like others not lose their jobs. But yeah, so that's how I initially got involved, and then we set up the branch in January. So there was little bit of like, I think it was a really stressful situation, and for me personally, I felt like I let people down because people did still lose their jobs, and I kind of fell away because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, like what more I could do than just be kind of reactionary to the like situations that happen. And that's when we started the branch in January, and that's when like I actually realized that no, we can create something, or we can do something different, and we don't need to just be sitting back and waiting for things to happen. We can actually change the industry and also like society as well, and like look at what issues faces as workers, but what issues actually faces as like people, and how we can kind of build on that. So that's how I kind of got involved, and I stood for like chair of the branch. No one else did, so I did get elected, which is pretty good. And then yeah, and it was like I was such a wee geek. I pure looked up like searched for my WhatsApp to like my organizer for the word like chair, because he texted me saying, I think you should go for chair for the branch, and it was me going, yeah, I was going to anyway. He's like, oh great. And I pure like looked that up, and it was the 11th or 12th of January, so it was just a few days ago, but a year ago, and I was like, oh, look at that. But yeah, so that's how I got involved.
Yeah, that's class. And it really does feel like, well, obviously, I think you might agree with me in this, but I don't know. The hospitality industry, well, in Glasgow specifically, is becoming a real hotbed for trade unionism. And like hospitality workers are dead fed up with the conditions that they've got. And they're kind of organising to a level that we haven't seen before. I do know that there is like a kind of proud history of organising and trade unionism within the hospitality industry. But do you think it's at like a all-time high? And
yeah, I think so. So I think one of the things that people are continuously pulling up is the fact that like kind of mainstream media and even like companies are like trying to saying that we're short staffed and we don't know how. We can only operate 5 days a week because we're so short staffed, and it's like it's almost as if like there's a mystery of where did all these hospitality workers go? And you're like, well, you either made them redundant, or they've went through a whole pandemic and decided that they actually don't want to go back to a workplace that makes them risk their life for minimum wage, and kind of like saw alternative employment. Like I can say like I left hospitality and I work in I work in a bookies now, but like so it's still it's still a service industry and stuff. But I'd had enough. Not saying that I'm like I still want to change the industry, and I still actually miss hospitality. And when I go into a place and I look about, I'm like, why are they not doing this? I could do this. Like, why don't I just like get up and do a shift kind of thing? Like, I do like miss it. But it's just the kind of there's so many issues around hospitality that people have just either went, I'm not taking it anymore. But the people that have stuck it out are the ones that are going, I'm not taking it anymore, and I know how to change it. And that's what we're getting from like McMary workers. Like they've stuck in hospitality for so long. Like we've got members that have had issues in different workplaces and then moved here, and it's like these issues just follow me around. So if they're following me around, I need to change them, because it's not about the employer. It's actually just like a systemic issue within the industry that we're fighting to change. So I think there is a lot of that, and I think the kind of consciousness came from COVID of being on like furlough and realizing how kind of, and like the kind of branding that we got as well as like workers, like the kind of low skilled side of it, which and everybody like in the amount of people that were like, no, we're actually not like on a shift. We need to be like the amount of stuff that, I mean, no one's low skilled, no work is low skilled, but for the kind of, it was almost like an excuse about like hospitality, why we were one in like danger so much, like when they reopened things prematurely and stuff like that, and also being on 80% furlough and the compulsory redundancies that were made in so many companies. It was all used as like oh well, they're low skilled, as if we don't matter, but everyone uses hospitality, and that was the thing that everyone missed and moaned about and said, when are the pubs opening, when can I get a pint and stuff, and you're like, right, hold on, so you're desperate to actually use the service but you don't care about the people that are delivering it. And I think that's one of the kind of reasons that people have just decided no more.
Yeah, and over the past year, I think I'm right in saying this, that Unite Hospitality Glasgow became one of the biggest branches in Europe within Unite, which is mad to see it come from you, well, basically you getting a redundancy from a hotel to being one of the biggest branches in Europe. Also, it's pretty impressive to go that full year. So congratulations on your branch's first birthday. What do you think over the past year, you like that branch will have seen loads of good victories as well, or loads of good actions and so on. What do you think your favourite one was?
I think my favourite one, and I know we'll probably talk about it later, but the conference was something that I thought was really, really excellent. It brought so many different kind of people about, and it was a lot about the different branches coming up as well. So it was people that we've all like supported throughout the pandemic. We'd have like Zoom meetings, and I knew the like branch secretary of like London and the North Ireland and stuff like that. So we all know each other, but we'd never like met properly. And it was like that was really good. And the fact it was during COP as well was really something that I thought was important. So I did enjoy that kind of part. And I felt like that was more like a kind of party and kind of celebration of what we'd built. Other successes, I think, is just to be honest, I think my kind of favorite thing is when we actually have branch meetings and we either get, and she's probably going to be really angry at me for doing this, but Laura is probably the biggest highlight. I was going to try and keep it generic, but I remember the Zoom meeting that so we had a branch meeting and Laura came along and was like speaking and was like so powerful and talking about things, and then we found her like Twitter, and she was like, going to my first union branch meeting, it's not like basically saying I think it's going to be boring, and then she was like, oh my god, it's not boring, I think I found like comrades, and we were just like, oh my god, we love Laura, and she became branch secretary for the branch and stuff. And I think that was something that was really like, just from one meeting where I kind of worried that if you're chairing things and it's on Zoom and we're talking about things and people are coming and maybe not knowing exactly everything that we're doing on exactly what a branch is, do they even take anything away from these? Is it just me that sits back and gets buzzing after them, or is it like, or are we actually building something? And I think someone that had recently just like moved to the country and had never been to one before and kind of became so like enamored with us, and we became so enamored with Laura as well. I think that really kind of showed like even you can't even get solidarity even through a Zoom meeting. And I think that's why like I do get excited for every kind of branch meeting. I'm like, who else is a Laura? Like who else can we kind of like, who else gets excited from this kind of stuff? And I think it was quite reassuring for me that we were building something. So I think that was probably my highlight as well.
That's so nice. That's so nice. That's like, yeah, like Unite Hospitality Glasgow and Laura are like a match made in heaven. Obviously, I got to know her through making that video with you for the conference, the Unite Hospitality conference that you did during COP26. And when I was interviewing her and talking to her, like that's what she was saying. She was like so buzzing to move to Glasgow and experiencing the kind of the trade union history that already existed, but then being part of what was happening just now and like making history, which is what you guys are doing essentially. Like I think that will kind of fly under the radar and you'll kind of not really realize it when you're in the moment, and you'll look back and you'll be like, that's nuts that we did that, you know. But yeah, no, Laura's amazing. She's small, but she's a firebrand. She's dynamite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us a bit more about the hospitality conference that you hosted? You know,
Sure.
like tell us a bit about the speakers and what you've achieved from that, really.
So like it was the first thing I've actually organized the content of. So I was like, I no bother, like a conference is easy, because I'd been at the other side of it where you just like make sure like the teas and coffees got out at a certain time, that you've got the chairs and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, yeah, I've got experience organizing stuff. And then I was like, oh my God, no, someone else is doing that. Like I actually need speakers. And we got the general secretary of I can't remember the initials of it now. I actually looked it up and I don't want to try and say them if they're wrong. It's the European Union for Food Workers and Tobacco. So it encompasses everything from like fruit pickers to bartenders, baristas, and it's all over Europe. Sue Longley, that was massive to get her to kind of the IUF to confirm to come. And then we also had kind of people that organised it, like that are kind of high up in the IUF that we dealt with before as well. So Massimo and Jeffrey. So this was like big international delegates. And Sue spoke about like the issues of like greenwashing within hospitality. And I think a lot of the time, because we were quite conscious that we're holding a conference during COP26 and it's a hospitality one, so we were quite conscious that there needs to be a link there, and I wasn't particularly sure what the link was, but actually the kind of more that you look into it, you're like, well, it absolutely does make sense. Like, how do you travel, and also like looking at workers kind of exploitation and linking that to climate crisis, and looking at the fact that if you go into a hotel and they say, oh, we don't need to wash our towels every day because we're saving water, that's in actual fact just getting rid of a housekeeper. So tying that in together was something that we thought was really, really important, and Sue did that wonderfully, because obviously she's well aware of the situation that's happening within hospitality, and because it's a union for workers all around the world, she was able to look at like tea pickers in like Africa, and discuss like their issues with the climate crisis and make sure that it was a global issue, because that was something that we thought was really important as well. We had Mchale, who's a 17-year-old, and he is amazing. He's arranged so much. He was just like everywhere during COP, and he's just a really radical, powerful kind of 17-year-old socialist. And I met him at a picket, and I'd needed someone to speak about the environment and asked him like at the GMB picket at Polmady, and he's like, yeah, of course. And he was truly excellent as well, and really inspiring, to kind of show like what we can do about that, like about the climate crisis. And then we had John Rutley, who was one of the leading shop stewards at the Lucas Aerospace. I knew nothing about that until he was obviously on the bill, and I was like, wow, like what he kind of did and what the things that what they were kind of the alternative proposals that they put forward. I kind of linked it obviously to what we were trying to say back in like 2020, and it was like so interesting to see that other people have been so kind of empowered by putting alternative proposals forward, and the things that they were trying to make, like ventilators instead of arms and stuff, like instead of arms, like making ventilators, and how prevalent that is in 2022, 2021 and 2020, and just kind of hearing that and like linking something that happened so many years ago to everything that's happening now was, I thought, really important. And obviously John's been a trade unionist for his whole life, and it was just like really interesting to have a pure veteran of the movement speaking at a hospitality conference. And then later on we had 4 speakers. So we had the trade minister for the Scottish Government. He spoke, which is obviously important because we are in Scotland and he is the trade minister. So it could have been very important. We had like the kind of Fair Work Convention person from Unite speaking, Mary Alexander. She's great as well. And then like kind of poets, and we had like videos as well. So we had from yourself. So we did a really kind of, and it was quite interactive, and then obviously like workshops as well about issues in hospitality and the environment. So it was a very like interactive conference, and it wasn't just like, you know, delegates standing up and speaking. And we had a woman from, she works in America, I want to say Boston, and she's a housekeeper, and she's from South America, and she spoke about her reality of being a housekeeper during the pandemic, and to have someone there discuss like what's happening to her, and like to have someone so powerful and what they're doing in America. Like we can say it's difficult for us to organize here, and you know, like the threat that poses and stuff, but actually to be doing it in a country that's even more hostile towards trade unionists, and to be a migrant worker, and to be a woman, and to be taking on one of the biggest hotel chains in the world. She was like particularly inspiring, I found, and so important to get as well, and just kind of make sure that the people in the US know that we have, like, we're expressing solidarity from Scotland and stuff like that. So there was a lot in it, and it was only like 9 till 5, but see, when you actually talk to people, they were like, how long was this conference, like how many days did this go over? Usually like, so we did this, we did that, and you know, we packed a lot in, and I think it was a real success, and it was something really exciting to do, and we were one of the only kind of branches to do something like that. Like obviously there was so many fringe events and so many fringe actions, but I think we were one of the kind of only ones that actually did something like that as well. So I was very, very proud of everyone involved.
Yeah, you should be. It was like some of the speakers were unbelievable. Well, in fact, all of the speakers were unbelievable. But I think what's really important as well is like utilizing the knowledge and the skills that you have, and like trying to pass them on to other people, and kind of sharing that with other people, getting their feedback and learning about their skills and so on. So it is a very important thing to do, and I would love to see like more branches do that throughout Scotland, because that's how you learn. Like I think back in 2018 or something, I went to the Peace Academy with the CND, where it was something similar. Just I think you had Better Than Zero and stuff like that in there as well. And it's just all of these different minds and all of these people that are involved in various campaigns coming together to share tactics and so on. And it's so important for the movement. It brings out solidarity much more as well. But yeah, the conference was really cool. So I want to ask about Better Than Zero, because earlier we were speaking about how kind of trade unionism's really picked up in the hospitality sector. And I think the first time I properly noticed that was when Better Than Zero came around and they started doing actions. So could you tell us a bit about them, you know, your experience at their summer school, if that was kind of similar to the CND thing, and kind of how they've grown over the years?
Yeah. So Better Than Zero, it's Better Than Zero is quite interesting. I think this was something that I wish maybe more and I know you've got experience in it as well, is after campaigning for independence, was saying, well, we're not tolerating this what was before. We've built this kind of demand, even though we didn't get the ultimate goal. What can we build now? So Better Than Zero kind of came out of that, which I think that's amazing, and I think that's a really good kind of rich like kind of history for that to have came from that. And it's a STUC thing, so it is a kind of trade union campaign group. But I think one of the things that Better Than Zero is good for is sometimes when it comes to like people saying, oh, have you joined if they've got issues, I mean, like, oh, if you joined Unite Hospitality, you get maybe sometimes a little bit of hostility towards trade unions to start with. So Better Than Zero is really good at building collectives and like empowering people, which ultimately will lead to like what's happened with McMurray 300. It's a collective grievance with union members in Unite Hospitality. So it's working together, but it's also what they do is the kind of collective side of it, and also supporting workers as well. And I mean, I think the name's excellent as well, like campaigning for the end to 0-hour contracts and looking at the kind of precarious nature of not just hospitality as well. So a lot of work's been done with the Cineworld collective there, and the kind of campaigns that they had with like Cineworld, and that was one of the first things that I knew about it. And it's a good, and it's a kind of the groups, the people that are kind of involved in Better Than Zero, we all come from like different places. So like I'm Unite Hospitality, you've got Cineworld people, GMB, just different kind of activists, and we all just sort of organically come together. And I think that was one of the things that was really good about the Falkland School, the summer school that I attended, that was organised by Better Than Zero. We had so many different activists from so many different kind of either trade unions or organisations, or kind of just like kind of activists or left-leaning people, and we all worked together and kind of did like a lot of like kind of different exercises, but also I wouldn't say networking because that makes it sound like a business, but you know, building a support network's probably the best way to describe it. So if there's ever any action happening, like for instance today in Dundee, there's going to be Better Than Zero people there that are like Live and Rent members from Edinburgh. I'm going Cineworld people, like, do you know, all these people are like coming together because we've spent like 3 days together kind of inspiring, talking about what is solidarity, how do we build collectives and actually live in it as well, which is a really kind of beneficial part to the trade union movement, I think. So I think, yeah, I think that's the kind of main things that I would say about Better Than Zero as well. And like, I think the organizer, Tam, he's excellent as well. He's really helped me with the Safe Home campaign, like me and Eilish kind of setting that up and stuff. And just, I think you can have activists and we can have the best intentions or like what we want to do, but we need someone there to be able to actually help us initiate it, and also how we go about doing like what campaigns we want to kind of run. And I think that's a really important part of Better Than Zero as well. It's actually just like saying like, what is it you want to do, and kind of explaining it, and then being like, right, okay, this is how we'll facilitate it, this is how we'll help it, whether it's like making zines about landlords or like a safe home campaign or these kind of things. They're really, really supportive and really able to help us with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting that it came out from the independence campaign, because when you said that, it kind of clicked in my head. That was like the first time that I noticed it was after that. But yeah, no, I do know what you mean as well with like the kind of momentum that came out of the independence campaign. Like I only really supported it because it was an opportunity just to kind of break up that power structure of the UK. But obviously when that didn't happen, I think I was kind of more involved locally, and everyone who was for independence just kind of in the region that I live in, Eastern Bartonshire, we all just kind of met up on all these different groups and we just talked about the fact that independence wasn't happening just now and it wasn't going to happen for a long time. So we just kind of listed everything that we wanted independence to change, or we would have had the power to change, but now we don't because it never happened. You know, so we had like different things, like the media was a big one, how kind how kind of like right wing the media was, and kind of forming our own alternative media. But also the one that me and Cammy got involved in was the fracking one. Like everyone just kind of said, right, we'll campaign on that, use campaign on this. And ultimately, like, it's mad to see just from that independence campaign, and even though it didn't happen, still a lot of change did come out of it. Like Better Than Zero came out of it. Me and Cammy, we set up our own anti-fracking group in Bishopbriggs, which was then, it was like part of a national campaign, which was eventually successful. And there's like loads of other examples of different kind of things coming out from that kind of politically charged moment. But it was a really cool time to be part of all that. Just on the Safe Home campaign, could you tell us just a bit about the Safe Home campaign, why you think it's important, stuff like that?
Sure. So Safe Home it's about demanding employers to kind of recognise that they have a duty of care for workers out with the workplace. So it's, if you work in kind of late night industries, if you work in late night industries, you are not going to be able to get public transport home. The infrastructures that are kind of designed are basically to support 9 to 5 working. And that obviously doesn't serve hospitality or Cineworlds or like cinemas and that kind of thing. So that means that you're either compromising your safety or walking home, or you're financially burdened due to trying to get home in a safe manner. So that's the kind of main principles of Safe Home. I think for me personally, the reason that it's became such a prevalent like a kind of prevalent campaign that I want to get involved in is in like in the past kind of year, what we've seen, like what just women trying to like simply walking home, or even this week jogging in a park, and we can't do that without like being like without femicide occurring. And if you speak to any female like hospitality worker or late night worker, they will be able to tell you an incident of themselves feeling unsafe, or someone they know feeling unsafe, and what like and that's the reality. And it's not like employers don't know that that's going on. It's not like it's a secret within society that, well, wait, do you mean you feel unsafe when you walk home? Like, yes, of course, that everyone knows that. So I think it's challenging that kind of almost as if it's a given, as if like, well, that's okay. That's not our responsibility about what's happening. They're like, no, it actually is. Like, if you think about it, getting a taxi. So no one lives in like the city centre. Like you just couldn't afford it. So getting a taxi to kind of further out in the city, it's going to cost you an hour's wages at least. So if you're working, so transport finishes at 12 o'clock and you work till 1, you're essentially working for free that 1 hour. And why should that be the case? Or what you can do sometimes is like you compromise what happens to you within your workplace. So if you're skint and it's towards the end of the month and you know you need to get a taxi home, see if there is someone that's been a bit inappropriate with you in your workplace, you're actually going to lap it up a little bit more because you need the tips to get you home. So you're compromising your safety within your workplace as well because of this kind of financial toxic circle. So I think the Safe Home campaign essentially eradicates a lot of the compromises that women have to make to get themselves home safely. And I think that's why it's really important. Our kind of current target or kind of aim is to speak to Glasgow City Council. So I know you just mentioned that you're East Dunbartonshire Council. They've obviously put Safe Home into the licensing objective. So I won't go too much into licensing because it is quite dull, but the licensing, if you're a licensed premises to sell alcohol, you have to adhere to certain laws, and they are put out by the licensing board. Glasgow City Council is the largest, it's the largest city. It's one of the most stringent licensing boards, and they are negating their responsibility to workers in the licensing objectives, because Safe Home is not part of the licensing. They're leaving that solely up to employers to protect the workers, and that's not going to happen. So we have written to Glasgow City Council in an open letter with no response as of, it's about a month since we wrote it, to ask them to change the licensing so that it can be adapted. Now we're getting a lot of like pushback from different councils, and also like Glasgow City Council saying it's simply it's not legally possible. East Dunbartonshire Council has ratified that, so it is possible to happen. So it's a lie to say that, and I think Glasgow City Council, because we're obviously ramping up this campaign, Glasgow City Council need to be particularly careful on how they ignore us, because there is an election for councillors coming up this year, and if women's safety and the nightlife industry, the workers that support the nightlife industry aren't considered during their election campaign, we are going to make that very well known. So I think it would be very beneficial to actually start looking at how, instead of just telling blatant lies and saying it's not possible, we should be looking at how we can actually support workers getting home safely after their shifts. So that's the kind of, I think that's the kind of bare bones of Safe Home, and there is obviously going to be a lot more to come. We did an action outside Glasgow City Council as well, which was really quite well received about Safe Home, and that was the kind of main launch. And there is a petition for Glasgow City Council as well, so we're going to try and amplify that, because obviously it was like Christmas and we took a well-deserved break from like December, from the kind of end of December as well, but it's now like, let's get everything started back up again.
Yeah, like you say, East Dunbartonshire Council, they did kind of they put that into their late night licensing requirements, which was like, I think, a massive step, because not only does it give your campaign momentum, but it also it does, like you said, set that precedent where you can just like point to them at any time and be like, they've done it, so you absolutely you have to do it. And I think Glasgow City Council will be one of the hardest to do because of how big it is, and I think as well, like the actual groups that own kind of hospitality venues and that kind of do have Glasgow City Council in their back pocket a bit, so it will be incredibly difficult to do, but it will be such a massive win, and something that I can, like, something that's realistic as well. Do you know what I mean?
No, definitely. I think that's what we all kind of think as well. Like, it's a tangible demand, and it serves so much of like the economy. So like taxi drivers have had a terrible past 2 years. If they've got this kind of agreement with employers and kind of guaranteeing that kind of trade, that's great for an industry and like kind of our like Unite branch that have been struggling. I think another thing that Glasgow City Council that I find quite despicable that they do is in December and also during COP this year, they extend the licensing for an extra hour for the benefit of the businesses, with no actual recognition that that means it's an extra hour for hospitality workers to work, and then to try and navigate the city centre an hour later, which can mean like 4 a.m, 6 a.m. Like, this is not safe times for that to happen, and it's a purely financial decision that Glasgow City Council are taking. So I think we need to be like, obviously the council's an SNP council, but like on the licensing board, it's like it's a mixture. But we've got Greens, we've got Labours, we've got SNPs. If you want to try and be try and put this image out that you're actually progressive and you care about workers, don't side with a financial decision for businesses unless you've got conditions put in there to protect the workers. And I think that's the extra hour as a hospitality worker, right? That extra hour kills you. In December, like you genuinely dread December, because instead of finishing at 3, you are like slumping out at 4 a.m, and it really does make it a hard month. And it's, so I think I've got a bit of like PTSD and like anger about that hour, and I think that's my kind of main bargaining point that I want to kind of put forward about that situation, because what you're making in that hour, you could easily get people taxis home.
Yeah, definitely. Like, my only kind of flirtation with the hospitality industry was when I was 18 and I was working on Neil's in Sauchiehall Street. And like, when you're 18, the minimum wage is like, it's pennies. I don't think I was making over a £5 an hour. And I was starting at 11. And because it was December when I started, so it was like a 4 o'clock finish. And at a £5 an hour, that's like 25 quid. That was my taxi home. That I was basically working for free, because that's how much I had to spend in a taxi home at that time in December from Sauchiehall Street. But I do think that was a really important point that you raised as well about the taxi drivers and how they'll benefit from this. Is that I know that there's a taxi driver that lives at the top of my street, and he's got a Unite Hospitality, not a Unite Hospitality, but a Unite kind of wee sticker on the back of his cab. Is that something that yous will maybe try and kind of work together with? I don't know if like taxi drivers have their own branch or however it works, but is there going to be like contact and kind of present a more united front so that the Safe Home campaign can kind of kick on? Because I know, like, in my experience, and like finishing at that time was mental. It was horrible trying to get a taxi home, but I'm doing that as a guy, you know what I mean? I'm doing that as a man. Like, I don't have that experience, and that experience as a woman where it like just everything is heightened and it's like 10 times more dangerous.
The Unite taxi branch and taxi branches in the whole of the UK are very supportive of this and want to kind of work with us a lot more. I know that venues that did have the agreement pre-pandemic, the taxi, like black cabs, gave them a discounted rate, like the employer a discounted rate, as well, to even support the businesses to actually make sure that people were getting it. So there is going to be work with us together to kind of make sure that this can be a reality. And I think a bunch of hospitality workers and a bunch of taxi drivers storming Glasgow City Council and demanding that is going to be, I think that will be pretty powerful and a pretty like Raj group. So I think we've got a good network set up, and that's just from like Safe Home being a campaign in like 2018 and the work that was done then, and just kind of like obviously what we've built with the branch and what other branches are building. And I think it's organically all going to kind of come together because of how much action there is within these different branches, and then just kind of bringing it all together. Like one of the things that Unite taxi branches do is education courses. So I was on that kind of launch that the UK is doing about Safe Home. They're calling it Get Me Home Safely because it is different, because obviously we've done so much more up in Scotland. But the Liverpool taxi branch Unite have education packs for taxi drivers, which entail how do you identify situations that people might be in danger? How do you support the person? How do you do what action should be taken? All these kind of things. So women's safety is actually a priority for taxi drivers and stuff like that. And I think one of the only ways that you are going to help to support people is making sure that people are able to identify situations and through education. So I think that's a really important kind of thing. And I think sometimes you almost kind of assume like people aren't as switched on. Like I wouldn't have thought like taxi drivers would have had like women's safety at the forefront of their heads, or have this kind of campaign and this educational course and like leading the way on it. Like, I mean, that's not even something that happens in hospitality. Like we don't have this kind of education course about awareness, but the taxi branches do. I think that's something that's really kind of testament to how important their industry is to safety and how much they take the safety of workers like serious and women.
Yeah, that's dynamite. Well, that kind of feeds back to the point we were talking about earlier, and how the workshops that you were doing within that conference was kind of bringing different branches and so on together, and different kind of organizations, and then you can kind of share skills and you can borrow from each other and so on. And that's obviously something that the Safe Home campaign, but also like hospitality, Unite Hospitality Glasgow can do with taxi drivers. Like, I don't know how much there is stopping you from kind of stealing an educational pack from the branches down in Liverpool and kind of coming up with educational packs for hospitality workers to kind of I don't know, I feel like that would kind of build solidarity as well. If you can spot when, you know, like a woman colleague is in a difficult position or is in a dangerous position, then it can kind of be nipped in the bud, and it can produce that solidarity much more easily.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be a conversation with you without talking about Celtic. So can you tell us a bit about how growing up as a Celtic fan and being a Celtic fan just now has kind of influenced your political beliefs and your morals and so on?
Yeah. So I think, so for me, obviously, yeah, I used to, like, I've been going to games with my dad since I was like 7. And you don't not hear like the kind of songs and stuff like that and ask, like I used to ask my dad, I was like, who's Bobby Sands? Well, who's James Connolly? And he's like, great men, Caitlin, great. Like, and you know, like, and kind of trying to explain political terrain to an 8-year-old would be quite difficult. So it's like this, like it made it fun to kind of get interested in this. And that, I think that's the first time I actually knew what a trade unionist was James Connolly, which obviously I think it was almost inevitable for me to end up being like this, because if you're so indoctrinated in this kind of like what a trade unionist is and what you believe in and stuff like that, I think that really like changes your kind of perspective of things. To be honest, I think Celtic and like I think fans, it's a massive collective. Like it's all what, like you have the same kind of one goal, which is to win a match. Like you are all kind of united in that and like supporting Celtic. I think more could be done politically. Like for instance, there will be action now that we're allowed fans back. There will be action, and I really do hope that it is supported by the majority of Celtic fans, which is about scaffolders, Unite scaffolders that are not obviously being paid. It's a ridiculous amount of pay, and the CEO of it is a shareholder for Celtic. Dennis O'Brien. So, and he's like the second richest man in Ireland, and he's absolutely at it with his workers. So I really hope that this is something that as Celtic fans the majority of fans will get behind, and we will kind of try and support these scaffolders to make sure that they are paid fairly, and it is a campaign that is getting built. There has been a few kind of fan, like the Cynic, they've came out and said, yep, Dennis O'Brien needs to pay up, or he's not welcome at Celtic. So I think that's something that it's almost like my two worlds are colliding, and I'm quite excited. So my Unite and my Celtic, and they better not let me down. Like that element. And then also like what recently happened, and I think it does kind of show the power that fans can have, is like making sure that Bernard Higgins wasn't appointed. One of the issues I do see with that is the disconnect from the board to fans that was even considered. That man wreaked havoc on people's lives, and like working class people that were just going to go watch the football's lives for years, and to then be considered as if that was an appropriate appointment in any capacity, I think it shows that there is a real disconnect there. And yes, the actions that fans took, like I was at one of the games that was silent, and I mean, good on everything. Like everyone did do it. However, like it was terrible atmosphere. But you think, how terrible would that atmosphere be if that man actually got in? Like, what would actually happen then? So it was just a kind of snapshot, and I think that kind of power of actually not making any noise really, really kind of showed that like fans do it. And I think that's something that's kind of because of obviously the money that's in football and stuff like that. That there is a massive disconnect, but I think doing things like that shows that we actually do still have a kind of power, and we actually should be using that kind of power to demand, yes, like Bernard Higgins, and hopefully the scaffold, like getting Dennis O'Brien, and like, but more, let's build more, like let's look at kind of different situations, like, and I think obviously the Green Brigade do a lot of food bank collections and stuff, and I think if you look back to like what Celtic FC was like started and who started it and why, that's kind of tying into a lot of like history and stuff like that, and I think that's a really good way to do it. I'm not going to say that any kind of support groups utopic and perfect. I think we do need to look at how you can build to like challenge societal issues, as well as like, I mean, it's 60,000 people, like that's massive. Well, why are we not looking at more like how can we get involved politically? But then that's obviously me thinking that because I want to make everything political. So, but
as you should.
Yeah, but I do think people kind of forget what the sheer power of numbers can do, and I would like to see kind of more of that being utilised within like the police and crime sentencing bill. That's like the tactics that are going to be used on protesters have been used on football fans for like so long. They practice them on football fans and then use them on protesters. They use football fans as an excuse to curb like protests. So if you look at what happened with the YCL, the blatant lies that came out and said, oh, it was Celtic football casuals. No, it wasn't. But almost as if that negates their actions. So I think if we can actually look at what happens to football fans and then how that affects wider groups, and trying to kind of maybe even come together and like be like, how do we change like what's happening? Like, it's not acceptable when it happens to one group, and it certainly isn't acceptable when it happens to any group, and maybe even kind of building something on that, on like looking at how the police behave at football games, like the amount of like surveillance that's done, which is totally unnecessary. These are kind of all things that football fans and trade unionists can identify with, and like both experience. So we could kind of work together to reduce the likelihood of these things happening, maybe.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you in terms of like making football, not even making football political, because it is political. It's like all of these political people that have got their hands in political institutions have also got their hands in football clubs, and it's all interconnected, like you say, the way it's policed, and just kind of like the whole structure of it as well. Like, because football clubs follow a corporate structure, it's no different to any other corporate entity where someone is going to be exploited, and it's always the people at the bottom. Do you know what I mean? So it will be football fans that get exploited, and it'll be workers that get exploited. There'll be people that are responsible for it even being there in the first place. Do you know what I mean? Like, companies and corporations can't function without their workers. Football certainly can't function without its fans, and somehow they still end up at like the most exploited out of all of those institutions. It's definitely something where football fans are doing so much, and you do need to kind of celebrate the wins. Like you said, the Green Brigade, they do loads of stuff. They've done loads of political actions over the years. You know, stuff about that Bobby Sands banner against AC Milan. You know, stuff about the Poppy standing up for Palestine. Like, the amount of money they raised in that Palestinian issue was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And yeah, but it would be good to see like fans of other clubs doing that. You know, I kind of limit myself to just following Scotland about just now, but I would love to see Scotland fans doing stuff like that, kind of just stepping up and creating this kind of culture of solidarity within football, because it does kind of, the issues in football are mirrored in society. Society's issues are football's issues. Do you know what I mean? Like, especially with all the stuff that's coming out about racism, and people are quick to say football fans are so racist. And you're like, no, mate, that exists in all of society. And you can't pin that on football fans. You need to deal with the systemic issues that cause that. And that will stop it happening at football. You can't just kind of separate them issues. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild how like growing up as a fan of football can influence your political beliefs like that. Like, for me, I kind of grew up always saying like ACAB and stuff like that. And I was thinking, why do football fans say that? And then just kind of looking into it, kind of learning about anarchism and how the police are just a tool of the state and exist to literally just defend the private interests of capital. It's like, okay, I get it. I get it. But football can be such a roadway into that, and as it should be, because, like I said, the issues are mirrored.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. So I do want to talk quickly about, I'm kind of conscious of the time because I know you need to go to Dundee, but I do want to talk about Sharon Graham, because as a member of Labour, which it's a different conversation for a different time. I'm not going to slag you for it. Yeah, obviously being a member of Labour and then being a member of Unite, what is it like seeing Sharon Graham saying that she's pulling a lot of funding from the Labour Party to focus it more on Unite campaigns? And where do you think like the power truly lies in that relationship? Because me personally, I think that Unite is way more influential just now than the Labour Party, but I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah. So I think, so for me personally, like politics has started kind of changing for me, in the sense that I don't think that it's politicians that actually improve anything, and I don't think that that's who we need to wait for. For instance, if you look at the Labour Party conference not voting for £15 an hour, whereas I, as a trade unionist and as the chair of a branch, and Unite, can go into a workplace and demand £15 an hour, and I can build a campaign there, and that can be successful. I don't need to wait for some conference to decide that. I think I think that is testament to how there's such a disconnect. But as a trade unionist, I probably should be thinking, oh, the Labour Party is the way that workers are going to get better conditions and better treatment, but that's obviously not the case. I think shifting the funds to looking at more kind of progressive, not looking at more kind of left things, and also looking at how we put more money into disputes, because that is where we're going to get these wins, but also looking at how do we set up a national care service. That kind of element of changing Unite's funds is something that I think is actually beneficial. Sharon wrote an article for the Tribune, and it was a proper like mission statement of what's to come, and it is like, I think the reason that Unite's relationship and like Unite and Labour's relationship was so strong was we had Jeremy Corbyn. But why should we rely on an individual, and why should we be sitting in like basically awake or like kind of purgatory going, oh, we had Jeremy, we had all this hope, we had like power, and now we have Sir Keith, and we'll just like kind of hang about and see what happens? No, like it's not good enough, and it's not what the workers need. We need to be supporting our activists, we need to be supporting our branches, and we need to be supporting the workers in their workplaces. Having one individual that's progressive and could have changed something doesn't matter when you have people risking their lives going into their work, people that can't afford to actually live because their employers exploiting them. Like, these are things that you just need to sort now. And I think that's where kind of Sharon's coming from, and I think that's the absolute correct way to be. As a trade union, you need to prioritise the workplace, but it's more than the workplace. It's looking at society as well, and empowering the working class as well. And I think that's Labour doesn't do that, and Labour hasn't done that for quite some time. And then we had like 2 golden years of hope, and now we're back to something else that isn't going to support the workers. So I think that's a really important shift, and it's difficult it's difficult being a member of a party, particularly when you are quite critical of the party. But I do think there are radicals coming up. There are kind of like excellent, like Mercedes Villalba, the MSP, she's excellent. Call, Mchale and Lauren, I can't remember her second name, they're standing for the youth EC, and that's 2 socialists. So we can't, like, I think there's the kind of argument of, should you try and change your party, or if you don't like something, do you leave it, or do you try and change it? But I do think, is that even possible in Labour, and should we even bother?
Yeah, I do get what you mean. And like, for me personally, the argument is also, even if Jeremy Corbyn did get into power and so on, and even if Labour did have this whole roster of socialists, how able would they be able to change the entire system when they're still kind of operating within one of the main ways that the system uses to defend itself? Which is, it's definitely tough to be a member of the Labour Party, so fair play to you for still being there. But yeah, I think that was everything I wanted to ask you, so thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. No, thanks very much. This was good. I was quite nervous, but it was good.
No, you done good. You done so good.
Cool.